of Lore, Any Jotless Story, by RC5280. 1,194 days after the Battle of Geonosis, Kyrimora, Mandalore. The missions, the nightmares, they were over. I was finally free. But what did that mean? What had I been freed from? And what living nightmare would greet me when I finally woke up? All I had known my entire life was war. But was the war over now? Or had all that been one of the dreams? It was hard to tell if I was dreaming now. Maybe this sense of inner peace was something my brain had constructed while I was sleeping. Was I asleep? It was so hard to tell anymore. Everything was always so foggy. I woke with a start in the middle of the night and looked around, not knowing where I was. It was a dimly lit room and there was medical instruments all around me. But this was no Imperial med bay, considering the lack of adequate lighting or med droids peering over me. A shadow moved at the edge of my perception. It must have been an enemy. I reached for my DC-17M on the bedside table. Maybe it would still be where I always kept it. A water bottle clattered to the floor instead. I grimaced, realizing I had given away to the enemy that I had seen him, and that I was here against my will, wherever here was. Blasted, I thought. I didn't have my trusted blaster at my side, and my enemy knew I was awake. This was not a good situation, and a lesser man might have been scared out of his wits in the same situation. But not me. I was a Republic commando, trained by Kal Skirata to be the toughest Chibwir on the battlefield. My instincts took over in less than a moment, and I launched myself out of the bed onto the enemy lurking in the corner. I'd rip his throat out and leave it there on the floor for my captors to find in the morning. It would be a satisfying end to whomever had kidnapped me. My head impacted the wall at full speed, and I slid to the floor. A mouse darted out from under where I had leaped, and I realized my mistake. There was no one there. Just a mouse, darting through shadows. I heard fabric brush against steel? Wood? I couldn't quite make out the sound, but I saw a much bigger form than a mouse, human-sized, in fact, starting to move against the opposite wall. I slowly rose to my feet, dusted myself off, and steeled my nerves for a fight. A very familiar voice drifted through the air towards me. "Tracker?" it said weakly. My eyes widened as I recognized the intonations of Jedi General Barden Jusik. Jedi. Something inside me snapped at the mention of the word. The room fell away, and I was greeted by a memory. His voice floated through my dreams almost as though it were filtering through a helmet comm. It was crackly and shaky, but somehow commanding and familiar. "The time has come," observed the dream voice. "Execute Order 66. My response was automatic. "It will be done, my lord. Good soldiers follow orders." "Jedi," I snarled, launching myself across the room at the traitor. "Kill Jedi." My hands quickly found their way around his throat, and I began to squeeze. But this one had learned hand-to-hand combat. Finally, a Jedi opponent who would be an actual challenge without help from the Force. He wrested my grip from his throat and quickly turned his hands to my throat, but his grip was too loose to choke me. His mercy would be a fatal flaw. He should have snapped my neck then and there. Oh, I was going to enjoy ripping out his entrails and leaving the mess for his fellow traitors to clean off the walls. That traitor and all his kind, every last Jedi, deserved no less. I started to move my hands up and between his arms to get myself back in control of the situation. I could still win if this traitorous whelp wasn't strong enough to kill me. But my arms wouldn't move. A growl rose in the back of my throat, and I tried to wrangle my head back towards his in a headbutt. But it, too, was restrained. I couldn't move at all. The growl rose to a deep, guttural yell. He would have to kill me if he wanted to survive. "Stop," the Jedi traitor declared authoritatively. "This isn't you, Tracker. You're safe and surrounded by friends. The war is over. You don't have to keep fighting." He removed his hands from my neck, but I still couldn't move. "You and your Jedi friends betrayed the Republic. I don't have to trust you," I spat. "Kill me now if you want to avoid retribution." "Tracker, that's all over now. Your squad is here too," he offered, appealing to my sense of brotherhood. The guttural animal roar grew in my throat again, and I let it rip.
"My squad mates betrayed me! They left me there in that temple all alone, and for what? To save some Dikutla Jetise? They're traitors!"
"Udesi, Nervod. Relax, my brother." Those were the very words Kalbuir had spoken to me so many years before, after I lost my first squad in a training exercise. It was disarming to hear them spoken by a mortal enemy. I lost control of myself and my anger. Everything stumbled inside me for a moment, confused. I wasn't supposed to feel confused. Focus, anger, that was my mantra. I felt it rising inside me again. Just as I regained control of myself, I felt a sense of tranquility washing over me, starting somewhere in the middle of my skull and radiating outwards. A Jedi mind trick. No, I wouldn't have him telling me what to think. I fought against it, picturing my rage, a hot red flame replacing the icy calm, but it was futile. Soon I was completely under his control. I stopped resisting my restraints, and a black mass started to build up in my stomach. "Feel better?" the Jedi wondered. I nodded, slowly, processing everything I had done and said to my old CO. I definitely felt less angry. Better? I couldn't be sure. The black mass suggested otherwise. My arms fell back to my sides, limp. Jusik had let me go. The black mass grew. It felt heavy in my chest, like nothing I had ever experienced before. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean all that. And I'm sorry I tried to kill you earlier. I know, Tracker. You weren't yourself. A tear began to roll its way down my cheek. He's right. I haven't been myself. And now I remember. Those missions, the nightmares, the ones that are over now, that was the last 4 months of my life. 2 months ago, Alderaan. My squad and I had infiltrated the city of Aprat, with orders to draw out some Jedi insurgents. Specifically, we were ordered to round up all the townspeople and keep them in the city square until the Jedi came out of hiding. It was a simple mission, probably better suited for a squad of stormtroopers than our elite special forces, but I didn't care. I had an opportunity to get revenge at those Jedi dogs for turning my squad against me. Besides, the Inquisitor who came with us didn't seem to have a lot of time for nonsense. Citizens had already begun collecting in the city square. One approached me. "Trooper, what's going on here?" he condescended. Trooper. The man was a fool. I was no ordinary stormtrooper. I was an Imperial commando, and I was not going to take this nonsense. In my helmet comm, I asked for permission. "Boss, can I shoot this imbecile?" "Not yet, 26. He couldn't even remember my number, even when it was right there on his HUD. It was the least I could do not to... not to raise my blaster and shoot the sergeant. But I restrained myself. "Sir, yes, sir," I intoned, disappointed. I turned my audio projectors on so the man outside could hear me. "What's going on?" I mocked. "Your city has been ordered to lock down. Now get back in the square." I raised my weapon at him. Boss clicked his teeth angrily. "You're flirting with mutiny there, 26. If you cross me again, I am going to report you, if not shoot you myself. Is that clear, IC 9726? "Crystal clear, boss," I replied. The Empire was all I had left after my squad abandoned me. I wasn't going to put my rank in jeopardy by signing up for a court-martial. I'd rather be killed in the line of duty. The city governor got up on a podium to speak. She was pale and looked like she was trembling even from where I was 50 meters away. Fear looked good on bureaucrats. "Is Duchess Cheta Organa accounted for?" the governor queried her people. A murmur ran through the crowd of hardly more than 1,000 people, everyone asking if they knew where the prominent duchess, not to mention minor member of the Alderanian royal family, had gone. The Inquisitor, I had forgotten his designation, joined the governor on the podium. A squad of stormtroopers rushed in from nearby city streets. So, the stormtroopers were coming in after all. Then why were we, the Imperial Commandos, here? Why did they need special forces? Boss? Scorch wondered out loud, thinking the same thing I was. Why are we here in addition to those white jobs? It's not as if they need us if they have those Dikute. "I don't know, 6-2, answered the sergeant. "Advisor, sit rep." I didn't hear Command's answer since I wasn't the lead. I didn't really care, as long as I still got to kill the Jedi. The governor asked about the Duchess again, and she sounded desperate this time. "Has anyone seen Cheta Organa?" A person in the back of the crowd shouted, "Look, in the street!" I swiveled my head to focus on where the citizen was pointing. I zoomed in with my HUD and ran facial recognition. "Boss, it's her. How should we proceed?" I asked over the squad comms. "Arm sniper attachment and keep her in your sights, 26, but hold fire," Boss ordered. "Command doesn't want her to spook, but we suspect she's involved with the Jedi activity." "Yes, sir," I managed through gritted teeth. If she was harboring those traitors, she deserved to be shot, and I was more than willing to do the job. But she could make our job easier if I left her alive. Besides, like I said before, I wasn't going to risk a court-martial over my quest for vengeance. I put the Duchess's white hood in my crosshairs and waited with my finger off the trigger. I might have been trigger-happy, but I wasn't stupid. In the corner of my HUD, I saw the Inquisitor step to the podium where the governor had been. "Now that we're all present, let's address the issue at hand, why we have gathered here in this plaza." Nervous tension washed over the crowd. Even through a helmet and focused on keeping my target in the crosshairs, I could feel it. "I have gathered you here because someone in this city is suspected of harboring Jedi fugitives." I heard a gasp come from everywhere in the crowd at once. Scorch's voice floated back into my helmet. "Is this guy for real? This is a waste of time. They're going to escape." "I'm sure he has a plan," Fixer retorted. "Let's see where this goes and wait for orders. Meantime, keep this comm clear." Scorch grumbled. Meanwhile, I still had my crosshairs fixed on Duchess Organa, and as she got deeper into the crowd, it was getting harder and harder to keep a clean shot. Eventually, I'd have to move. "Anyone who has any information about the fugitives should speak up now, or I will order my troops to open fire." 26, don't get an itchy trigger finger, Boss warned. Keep eyes on the Duchess, but don't fire until I give the word, not him. Understood, I replied, still grating my teeth. It's getting harder to keep a clear shot at her anyway. The crowd stirred, but no one spoke up. The stormtroopers raised their blasters, ready to fire into the crowd. Terrified shrieks filled the air, and mothers moved to shield their children's eyes. "Commander," began the Inquisitor, ready to give the order. His voice boomed through the small plaza. "Citizens, this is your last chance to end this without bloodshed." Not a word. I heard E11 power cells charging. "Open fire." All the blasters in the square, except mine, I noted begrudgingly, roared to life as the first salvo of blaster fire entered the crowd. I kept my crosshairs squared firmly on the Duchess's head, despite the crowd's movement obstructing my view. The first salvo was too short of a burst for my liking, but it got the job done. The crowd was crying and screaming loud enough that my helmet's noise suppression filters kicked in. I can't say I felt sorry for them. Harboring Jedi wasn't something I could forgive. It wasn't something anyone should have been able to forgive. Families cradled their loved ones, and I saw in the corner of my field of view a few trying to make a break for it. Stormtroopers quickly tackled them, crushing their hope of escape. We were strong, I realized. I liked that feeling. It was a rush even more powerful than ducking through enemy fire and taking a fortified position. I was in control of myself and the people below me. A smile worked its way across my face. I wasn't sure when it had happened, but I could feel the tightness in my cheek muscles. The Inquisitor spoke, again booming over the screaming and the sobs. "Ready weapons," he ordered. I heard blasters charging back up. "Would anyone like to come forward now?" he taunted. 26. Any activity from the Duchess? Wondered Boss. Negative. She seems unnaturally calm, I answered, wondering why she seemed so well composed. I have a clearer angle on her now. Do I take the shot? Negative, Boss ordered. Hold your fire, but keep eyes on her. I sighed, disappointed. Sir, yes, sir. Aim, ordered the Inquisitor. The crowd quieted. Fire at will. The words barely seemed a whisper to my ears, and yet I heard them so clearly. I again grimaced as I realized the order was not addressed at me. I put my focus back on the woman still dead center of my sights. She was rifling around in her cloak for something just as the shots started to ring out in the square. But this time, they didn't stop like they had before. The stormtroopers kept firing and didn't stop. The Inquisitor again spoke in his booming voice, cutting through the screaming, the blaster fire, and the tears. If any Jedi wish to reveal themselves and stop the suffering of this city, they may do so now. The Duchess found whatever she had been looking for and removed it from her cloak, and pointed it right at the Inquisitor. Blaster! She has a blaster pointed right at the Inquisitor. Boss, do I take the shot? Hold your fire, 26, came Boss's measured reply. I moved my finger inside the trigger guard just in case. I could see her hand tensing up and starting to shake. Even if she took down the Inquisitor, she wouldn't get past the stormtroopers. Or me. I had just about had it with being ordered to stand down. If she fired that blaster, I would put a bolt right through that pretty skull of hers before she even knew what had hit her. Stop! The voice was somewhere nearby, on my left. The Inquisitor looked up and smiled, while the Stormtrooper commander raised a fist in the air. The blaster fire ceased. I let out a victorious sigh. The Jedi had finally chosen to reveal themselves, and I would finally have a chance to drop one of those traitorous bastards. I kept my crosshairs centered on the Duchess's head. still didn't know what would happen next, and I wanted to be ready. She had dropped the blaster, and I could see her crying, even from the back of her head. All these deaths would be for nothing, and she couldn't stop it. Insurgents always thought about trying to save as many people as possible. They rarely succeeded, but somehow it never seemed to stop them from trying. I saw the Jedi slowly sauntering into the left edge of my FOV. I could just see him beside my scope. He looked like a boy, barely more than 12. But a Jedi was a Jedi, and he was a traitor. They had taken my brothers from me. As the boy walked out of my view, I saw that he was followed. One youngling, then another, and another. How many of them were there? It didn't matter. They were unarmed, and I would execute them easily. Target practice. The Inquisitor's smile widened. All the Jedi traitors are present, Commander. I sense no others. Kill them all, he ordered, gesturing not just to the Jedi, but to the entire plaza. He turned and walked off the makeshift stage. I pulled the trigger and didn't stop even to breathe until everything in the square had stopped moving. Present day, Mandalore. More tears were rolling down my cheek now. The black mass weighed down my stomach and I couldn't stand anymore. My legs gave way below me and I fell to the floor in a heap. The words caught themselves up in my throat. I felt like I was choking on them. I took a few hurried breaths to get my voice unstuck and finally managed it through the tears. I killed them all. Men, women, children. Shab. I did terrible things for the Empire, and I enjoyed it. I disgusted myself remembering the things I did. The massacre in Oprat that day. How much I wanted to kill them. My chest heaved, heavy with sobs. All those townspeople, citizens of the Empire, slaughtered, dead at my feet. I remembered the scene like I was watching a holovid. I had lived a nightmare, been a monster, devoid of everything except my hatred of the Jedi and of my own brothers. My criffing brothers. Nervode. No, I could never be forgiven for what I had done. I murdered innocents, children, Neverde, non-combatants. Kalguir taught me better than that. He taught me to kill when I needed to, but to leave the Neverde out of the line of fire. Civilians didn't deserve to be killed brutally in war. And I had killed them even when there wasn't a war. Why? How could I have done such terrible things? The nightmares. I'd had them all my life. Visions of myself being that monster. Last night, I finally slept easily. The nightmares were gone. The missions were over. What bliss it had been. I even remember smiling as I slept, knowing that the bad things were gone. How I longed for that amnesia, to simply crawl back to not remembering. I couldn't have been that thing. That poor excuse for a Vermando Carla, a Mandalorian warrior. I would have risked execution for insubordination before I murdered civilians. What had compelled me to follow those orders to murder those children? Why had I felt so much rage for all those months? I pried my eyes open and noticed Jusik was still sitting above me, watching me sob on the floor. I must have looked so pitiful to him, a man crippled by the terrible things I had done. General, I managed through the tears. Just kill me. I don't deserve to live. I'm a monster. No, Tracker. That wasn't you, Jusik explained, his voice calm and soothing. You were under the control of that chip, compelled to follow orders. He looked like he had an idea, but thought better of it. "We can get you through this, I'm sure of it," he finally stated with resolve. I still couldn't reconcile it. If someone else did those things, why do I have the memories? That was me, and I have to face some punishment for my actions. What I did was inexcusable. Jusek reached into my mind again with feelings of tranquility. It gave me enough composure to sit up and look him in the eyes. "It's one thing to gun down adversaries with blasters who are shooting back at me," I explained. He was a Jedi, he must have understood. The Jedi didn't kill unarmed civilians. What I did, I shot down defenseless children. I have to answer for my crimes. IC-9726 did answer for those crimes, Jusek comforted. The monster that did those terrible things you remember is dead. What do you mean, General? I wondered. He pulled something out of his belt, a glass microscope slide. Inside it was some kind of organic mass. I couldn't exactly tell what it was, but I could feel a kind of tingling sensation in my right temple. I rubbed my hand over the area and felt a bandage where my hair should have been. That thing, it was in my brain, I said, not sure if it was a statement or a question. I don't understand. We don't completely understand it either, Jusek replied. The Kaminoans put these inside all clones to make you follow any orders you were given. But you're free now. So that was what it meant. Freedom. The end of those horrible nightmares of the last 4 months of my life. I was no longer bound by some code I never swore to uphold. I was free from other people's rules. But it didn't excuse what I had done. I was still responsible for following those orders. So maybe I was controlled, I admitted, but I followed the orders, and I learned to hate my own brothers. I'm sorry, General, but I shouldn't be here. They betrayed me. That didn't sound quite right outside my head. Who had changed that night, me or them? I knew the answer. I remembered that night and all the nights before it with clarity for the first time in months. No, I corrected myself. I betrayed them. They don't deserve to have me back. Jusek looked shaken by my comment. I could tell from his eyes that there was something else that he didn't want to tell me. Tracker, they went all the way back to Coruscant to get you, the Jedi explained. They love you more than any other beings could. My anger flared like a blazing fire rising again from my gut. Was it my anger? I didn't know anymore. Then why would they abandon me in the first place? Before I could consider them, the words were out of my mouth and in the air. Jusek looked even more surprised. But they didn't abandon you, Tracker. They came back, even though they thought the man they loved was gone. They had a chance to save you, and they took it. He was right. They hadn't abandoned me. I had betrayed them, not the other way around. But I had believed the lies for so long. I don't know what to believe anymore, I confessed. So much has happened and I've been away from my squad so long. I hated them for so many years. How do I let those feelings go? How can I stop hating them? Varden nodded, understanding. It's not easy to realize we've been telling ourselves lies. A long time ago, I thought the Jedi were paragons of justice and virtue. Then the Clone Wars happened and I didn't know what to believe. I thought we stood up against slavery, but we used sentient beings to fight a war against their will. Shab, we got involved in a war. We were supposed to be keepers of the peace, but we got involved. We became officers, soldiers. I tried to convince myself for a while that it was justified, that we were still doing the right thing, but I couldn't, so I left the Order. He understood. I felt a weight disappear off my chest that I didn't know had been there. Jusik had also been lied to for most of his life. Somebody else knew this very same pain. So, how do I stop telling myself the lies? I asked, almost defeated. How do I recover? Jusik chuckled slightly. I didn't see what was funny. Sinfetin, a clean slate, a fresh white field of snow. I was still lost, confused. Maybe I had lied to myself, and maybe I wasn't responsible for the things I had done. But I had still done them. Could I be forgiven? Those people I murdered certainly wouldn't forgive me. Could I forgive myself? Kalbuir helped me find myself again, Jusik finally explained. My identity was shattered when I left the Order, but he told me that it didn't matter to the Mandoade who I had been, only who I am and will become. This lightsaber I carry on my belt, nobody cares how I got it. They don't care if I built it or if I stole it from a Jeti corpse. Maybe I even killed a Jedi. They don't care. They don't know who I was, and they don't care. That sounded nice. Maybe I could have a fresh start here on Manda Yain. But what about my squad? I wondered, still unsure how things would turn out. They know who I was before all this. A door opened on my right. I turned my head to look. A Mando, his golden armor looking vaguely familiar, limped into the room with us. They don't care either, stated Kal Skirata, taking a seat on the end of the bed behind me. His voice was gravelly and soothing in the way that a father's always was. They're your Vode, your brothers. They'll accept you and take care of you no matter what happens. Or even what already happened. That doesn't matter. But you do matter. They planned a dangerous op behind enemy lines to pull you out. You mean quite a bit to them, and you owe them your life. My jaw slackened a bit. How long have you been listening? I tend to notice things that go bump in the night, Kal explained. I've been outside the whole time. I figured Bardika could handle the situation. Kalbuir had helped me recover the last time I lost a squad. He could probably help me learn to live with the men I'd hated for so long. So, you heard the whole story, I wondered. Kalbuir cocked his head at me and gave a serious look. As much as you told, Adika. But I know something else about it is bothering you. He was right. A father's insight never failed. I hadn't told the whole story. Kal, those kids I killed, they were the same kids my squad saved during the Purge. 2 months ago. Bodies lay scattered all over the plaza. It was a gruesome mess, but it always surprised me how little blood there was. Death and carnage, but hardly a mess to clean up. And the eerie silence. A city square usually bustled with activity, and this one had, only minutes before. I remember looking down at the bodies, wanting to be sure the insurgents were dead. The Inquisitor had been clear. No survivors. I found the group of Jedi children not far into the crowd, all tightly bunched together in a group. Maybe they could have survived a few minutes longer if they had just had their lightsabers. They had a good tactical instinct. I took a closer look, studying the prey we had come so far to kill. Something seemed familiar about them, but I couldn't quite place it. Why would I recognize these Jedi, especially ones so young? I hadn't been around the Jedi officers much, being a commando. Even when I did serve in the general infantry, I only really saw the general in command of my unit, and not many others. So why were the younglings familiar? When had I seen such small ones? When I was ordered to attack the temple? No, all the Jedi I saw then were lying dead on the floor, not still living. Maybe Jedi younglings just all looked the same. The more I thought about that night in the temple, I finally remembered. The insurgents hiding in the communications tower. The reason our squad was at the temple in the first place. These were the kids my squad had abandoned me to save. I emptied an entire clip from my Deece into those tiny bastards. I wanted to make sure they lost their identities too, since they had stripped me of my own. When the blaster was finally empty, I armed the grenade launcher and stood back. This is what they deserved for turning my squad against me. I took the shot, blowing the pile of bodies into wet, bloody shrapnel that flew all over the square. I turned to leave, and I didn't look back. Call looked shaken. His jaw was loose, and I saw something in his eyes, an emotion I couldn't quite describe. I don't think he realized how much I had grown to loathe the men I once fought beside, and the Jedi that I thought had coerced them to betray me. Adika, he soothed, calling me a son and reaching his hand to touch my shoulder. I did some terrible things too back when I was a mercenary, but I left all that behind so I could be a buir to you poor clone kids. I had scars from the things I did, but my boys saved me. They gave me purpose and a new life to look forward to. Your Vode can do the same thing for you. Just let go of that hate, son. My chest heaved again, and I could feel the hot, wet streaks on my face. I can't face them, not after what I did, I told the old man. They want you back, Tracker, Kalbir told me, patiently. From the day they got here, they asked every day when we were going to rescue you. They'd give their lives to have you back, he said, his voice trailing off into a whisper. The blood had drained from his face, leaving him pale and gaunt-looking. He appeared even older than he was. I looked over at Jusik, and he too seemed pale and sad. I didn't know what had happened, but they weren't ready to tell me, and I didn't think I was ready to hear it. I don't want them to think worse of me for knowing what I've done, I said, finally admitting the root of my anxiety. I don't want them to think they rescued a monster. They didn't, Adika, Call said, looking directly into my eyes, wanting me to see he was telling the truth, or at least what he thought was the truth. You regret those things you did when you were the puppet of some old Tunla Chakar. You were following orders. But it was more than that, Kalbir, I protested. I enjoyed the things I did. I hated the Vode I fought beside, who would die to save me if they had to. I hated them for betraying me when I was the one who betrayed them. I couldn't make him understand what I was feeling, the hate I knew I deserved. He wanted to see something good inside me, so he did. I didn't think that part of me had survived the war. I wanted to believe I was that man I remember from before the Jedi Purge. I wanted to believe that my squad mates would accept me. But I couldn't believe it. If there was a mirror in front of me, I wouldn't have known who was looking back at me. Whether it was me or that other man in the flashbacks, the savage beast out for blood, the man that could hardly be called human. IC-9726 must have still been in there somewhere. I still had his memories. I looked over at Jusik. Please, General, don't you understand what I'm feeling? I can't trust myself, let alone my squad. I'm still not sure the parts of me worth saving even exist. I understand, the former Jedi said. He held up the glass slide with whatever piece of my brain they had taken out. But all that anger, all the hate and the suffering, it's all in here. The good parts of you are still in there. He gestured at my forehead, even holding out his hand like he was doing one of those force tricks, and closed his eyes. I could sense him looking around inside my mind. I feel your compassion, your regret, your pain. He screwed up his face in concentration, then opened his eyes and lowered his hand. And most importantly, your love. I feel how much you love your brothers. That kind of love, it's a choice you have to make, Tracker. Call rubbed his hand on the back of my shoulder. That doesn't sound like a monster to me, Adika. Just a child who lost his way. I reached up and grabbed his forearm, burying my face in Kalbuir's knee. I sat there for a few moments, crying. I must have looked like a Shabla infant, but I didn't much care. I needed to feel another person beside me, to know I was still human. They're all I have left in the galaxy, I sobbed. I can't risk my brothers turning away from me. Call patted the back of my head, smoothing out the hair. I can promise you they won't do that, Tracker. They love you more than anyone else in this Haran La'uvet. The hellish world. A poetic description of the Osikla mess the galaxy was in, if you asked me. He beckoned me with his free hand to come sit on the bed. I fought to stand up. Everything was so much heavier than normal. I dropped myself onto the soft berth before I was even standing upright. My legs just wouldn't support my body weight. My head fell against Kalbuir's shoulder, and I laid there, taking in the comfort of being next to him for a long while. He clasped my head against his, and I stopped keeping track of how much time had gone by. Eventually, Kalbuir squeezed my hand a little more tightly. Then he let go and carefully propped me back upright. I sighed deeply knowing he was leaving, but I was grateful for the moments we had shared, and realizing that I was still a person and a human being, but most importantly that I was not Darmanda, not a lost soul who had abandoned the way of the Mandalore. I had avoided that fate worse than death, and I owed my salvation to my brothers, Karota, Buckler, and Ajax. I dreamed that night, a vision, like the nightmares I used to have. But this dream was different. I wasn't seeing an awful future where I was the villain I always feared as a child. I wasn't pointing a blaster at unarmed civilians or Jedi this time. I was free from those nightmares. What I did see was a huge white field. The fresh snow was unbroken by footprints, a pure white sea all the way to the horizon. Something dark stood there, right on the edge of my vision. I squinted to try and see it, and began to walk towards whatever it was. It resolved into 3 figures, humanoid in build. As I got closer, I began to distinguish their distinctive Mandalorian Bushese. Their long kamas, decorative battle skirts worn over Beskar Gam, flapped behind them in the breeze. All I saw were their silhouettes, but I knew who these 3 people were. They were my old squad, and I ran to join them. The snow hardly slowed me down as I ran. I realized that there was something else behind my Mandalorian brothers. An army of white armor, camouflaged with the snow. The rest of my brothers, the whole Shabla clone army. I paused to catch my breath, and took in the scene. A bright red disk began to shine from behind the ranks of the figures, bathing the pastoral scene in a sanguine glow. The army looked imposing and intimidating, but the sight granted me an odd comfort. I smiled. Here was my Sin Fetin, just like Jusik had talked about. On the other side of it, I would be surrounded by my clone brothers. And the bright light? It was a new dawn on Mandalore. A new dawn for me.